Hello everyone and welcome to episode 11 of the Blues News podcast. Today I'm here with Paul, a Wealdstone fan, ahead of Tuesday's fixture. Firstly, Paul, how are you doing?
Okay, I guess. We didn't win yesterday, did we? We lost to our rivals, Barnet. They've gone top of the league. They thoroughly deserved the win. A little bit disappointing, it was on the telly and with over 2,500 people there at the Vale. So, listen, it's there's always encouraging things you can take from games, but when you get beaten 3-0 at home by your rivals and they go top of the league, it's not always the best start or evening because it was obviously a late kickoff. But we got to bounce back on Tuesday.
Well, yeah, obviously. Going into today's podcast, I guess we both got sort of differing moods. Obviously, a brilliant day for Southend yesterday. This will be obviously the first podcast that I've done since that. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But probably the best away game I've ever been on. I was just talking about it with Paul before the podcast. It was a brilliant day. It absolutely chucked it down at the end, but it was all part of the celebration, so it wasn't too bad. And I was just saying again that I think yesterday me and my brother timed how long we were travelling for, and it came up to about 11 hours. So, a little bit knackered today, but, it's 12 o'clock, so we'll get back into the podcast.
That's what football's all about. That's what you go to football for.
Exactly, yeah. And I've got work today as well, so that's great. So it'll be a little bit knackered for work, but that's all right. So I would like to start off by talking a little bit about Wealdstone's start to the season, obviously. So, one win in 10, it's not been an ideal start to the season. So, what has gone wrong? And also, are there any positives you can take from the start to the season?
What's gone wrong? I think the league has got possibly a bit stronger, but if brutally honest, it's leveled out. And I think you hear a lot of sort of pundits and bloggers sort of suggest that the league, there's no out-and-out sort of strong team. The likes of Barnet and Forest Green are going to be up there, but everyone seems to be able to beat everybody, and it's just getting tougher year on year. And I think with Wealdstone, the challenge they have is they've transitioned from a full part-time model to a hybrid model, so there is things in place to make them better off the field, but I think just on the field they're just not quite good enough, clearly, from what you see in the results. The positives are that we've got a couple of injuries, 2 or 3 injuries that we're still waiting to come back. So we've not had our full first 11. There's no lack of endeavour and effort, just a little bit toothless up top. We go 1-0 down and you struggle to see where goals are coming from. We scored six goals in 10 games. I think Gus Scott-Morris has got more goals from fullback than our whole team has. So, I think that's where the problems lie, because defensively, yes, it was 3-0 yesterday. One was a penalty, one was in the 96th minute, etc. So defensively, we're not too bad, I don't feel. It's just that final third. And if we go down or we're it's at 0-0 for a long time, I cannot see where those chances are coming to get goals and wins.
Well, you spoke about the injuries there, and, do you think that will have a big impact on Tuesday's game? And will any of them likely to come back for Tuesday's game?
Well, we had 𝗘𝟭🭫 came back as a substitute yesterday and came on. But unfortunately, he came on because Jack Cook had to go off. And Jack Cook's been exceptionally good again this season. One or two errors possibly. But on the whole, he's been what we expect of him and what the National League have seen. He limped off or sort of trudged off, so I have no idea what his problem was. So, we lose him, but 𝗘𝟭🭫 comes back. Sam Ashford was on the bench ready to come back on after his broken cheekbone, so he's available. But we're still missing the likes of 𝗘𝟭🭫 and Craig Eastman, who haven't actually kicked a ball yet. Max Kretschmar appears to be injured. Dion Woodman, who was with you guys last year, who signed back for us, I think he had a facial injury, so he was present yesterday but wasn't playing. So, I think come Tuesday, I genuinely don't know. I'm just hoping it hasn't got worse with Cook going off, but it was good to see 𝗘𝟭🭫 back. So there is positives in that sense, but Tuesday may be a bit too soon for some of them, I feel.
Well, I think 𝗘𝟭🭫 was a massive miss for you. How good has he been? Because I think he was a player that Southend were looking at a little bit in the window, but I think it didn't quite work out. I believe he sign a new contract.
He has signed a new contract, yeah. And he's, you know what, he's one of those. I think he divides opinion. He probably doesn't score as many as he should, but he's a nuisance up top and he's a presence. And he had a purple patch around Christmas last year, but didn't really kick on. And we were hoping maybe this season, get a pre-season under his belt with us and be the mainstay as a centre forward with the support of Sam Ashford. We got young McFarlane from Fulham has come in now. Sandat, who's obviously with you in the youth system, who's gone away to Hull and come in. So we looked like we had a centre forward sort of quadlet that could be a threat. We've just not seen it. Matt Taylor does like to play almost a 4-4-2 sort of system. So you got two up top, which we're not used to, having had Stu and Matty. You played sort of that three at the back, wingers, one up top, being supported by the midfield. So we've not really seen the proper Wealdstone, and the Dark was definitely part of that. How he kicks on after his injury, we've got to wait and see. We're just hoping he makes an impact when he does come back, but I have no idea when that is going to be.
Well, from an outside perspective, it looks like, I believe you scored about 7 goals this season. And obviously, you mentioned it already, Gus Scott-Morris on his own has scored 8. So it's from an outside perspective, it definitely looks like goal scoring is the biggest issue. Do you think goal scoring is, the lack of goal scoring is the biggest issue at Wealdstone?
Yeah, without a doubt. We scored 6 in 10 games. 2 of them came against Forest Green last week. So, 4 in 9 games. At home, I don't think we scored in the last 5 games at home. You're coming to the Vale on Tuesday night. There's got to be hope that, Southend aren't the first team to concede against Wealdstone from your perspective. It's real tough. And I know Southend have struggled with centre forwards this season. You're just fortunate, I guess, that you're a good team. You've got good players, and that could be compensated a little bit with the likes of Scott Morris being able to sort of chip in, whereas we haven't had that. I'm not saying that we're not creating the chances. I think that there possibly is, but there's not enough, and we're not clinical enough. And then, you go one down, like I said, it's a real uphill battle then. So, goal scoring, everyone wants that 20 a season goal scorer. They're few and far between. We don't have the budget for that type of player. We need others to chip in. It's just not happening.
Well, I think now is probably a good time to talk about it, because it is something that I wanted to talk about. And you've already mentioned both the players that I wanted to speak about. So obviously it's the Southend podcast. So two Southend boys who actually played for us last season. Obviously one you mentioned came through our youth academy in Henry Sandat. So Henry Sandat and Dion Woodman. Obviously Dion Woodman wasn't at the club for very long. But how have they been for Wealdstone?
Well, Dion Woodman's hardly played, to be fair to him. He came on loan to us last year from QPR. I think he played 20 minutes in one game and a few minutes in the other, and went off back to Rangers. And I think he was just cover for someone like Jack Cook or Barrett, who got injured. And then he went to you guys. So we didn't really see a lot of him then. He's come back pre-season. He's a presence, as you know. And again, he's hardly played. He unfortunately got injured in training. I think he smashed his face, or he got caught in the face. So he's not been able to play. So to be honest with you, it's really difficult to form an opinion on him. He looks like he's got the attributes to be a good centre-half because of his size and youthfulness. But I suppose we've still got to really wait and see, because he's not been tested. Henry Sandat, I don't know what Southend fans think of him. He didn't really play too much with you when he went back on loan, did he? And he's a young lad. He's raw, really raw. He appears to be someone who's got something in his locker. Just hasn't really done it for us. If I'm brutally honest, he does look a little bit off the pace, and I guess it's a really difficult one. Do you stick with him and let him bed in? But when we're struggling for goals, then sometimes you've got to mix it up, and he hasn't really appeared in the last few games, which hasn't helped him. He was subbed yesterday, didn't come on, so you may see an appearance from him on Tuesday, but at the moment he's not been playing too regularly.
No, it's a shame, and I agree with you. He just looks like a young player who, he's still really young, and he definitely has something in him, but it's just about, sort of picking up a consistent run of form, I think, for him. And I don't think he ever really did that at Southend massively. You know, he had his moments, but and as you're saying, it doesn't look like he's done that at Wealdstone too much. He did score, so that's something. That's always a good start. But Dion Woodman, I think, is a player that will really shine for you this season, as long as he sorts out injuries and everything. And if he is fit for the season, I mean, he'll be a brilliant player. When he played for us, he didn't play much, but in the few games that he did play towards the end of the season, I mean, he was just fantastic, really a good player. So he's definitely a quality player, and I think he'll be a great player for you, really. So moving on, I wanted to talk about, obviously you got promoted in 2020. So I always like to see how big was the jump from National League South to the National League. How big was that jump?
I mean, for a club like Wealdstone, really quite big, and because they were part-time going into a predominantly full-time league and hadn't been in it for a number of years. So that was a real challenge. Fortunately, we had a good management team in Dean Brennan and Stewie Maynard. And then when Stu took the reins, which is really, it was helpful in that sense because we could, there was a bit of continuity. And what they were able to do was exploit the youth market, the loan market, untapped potential, and they got a real identity to the team. And as you've probably seen since in the last 4 years, they play some of the best football in the National League. What they've tried to do on and off the field is those incremental advantages and changes to make them better. Full-time manager, improve the ground a little bit, strength and conditioning coach, all these little things that full-time teams have that they're now trying to implement. It's just really difficult because, like I said, I think the league is getting stronger. And I think when you look at the likes of Oxford City last year, came up, went straight back down. The teams that got promoted last year are in the bottom half of the table, if not the bottom four. So it's just a really, really tough league. And it's a massive jump from that regional National League into the top league. And it takes time to adapt. And I think the likes of Maidenhead have done very well. The likes of Yeovil will do well because they've got good infrastructure. Those smaller clubs like Wealdstone, it's a real challenge. And, you've got to take your hat off to the board, the management, the fans, that Wealdstone is still competing in that league. It may come to an end this season. We may get relegated. It's going to be the toughest yet this season. But to be competing and taking points off the likes of Southend and Oldham and Barnet and, Notts County, all those sorts of teams over the years has been a real fillip for us because, some years ago we were homeless and we're now sort of at the top table in non-league football.
Well, you mentioned Dean Brennan there, and obviously he's been in the limelight recently with the Barnet interview. I know your thoughts on that, and obviously watched the podcast. But what did you make of Dean Brennan while he was at Wealdstone, and how do Wealdstone fans sort of think of him now?
Listen, Dean Brennan with Stu Maynard, they played a brilliant brand of football. They played on the front foot. They tried to outgun teams, especially when they first came into the National League. We had some bonkers results at the beginning of the season. He produces good football teams. He did very well with Hemel Hempstead Town in the National League South. He came to us and we got promoted in the COVID season. I still genuinely believe that we would have won that league, even if it hadn't been cut off. Havant and Waterlooville were chasing us down, but I do genuinely think we would have won it. And you've got to respect the fact that he got us into the league. Whatever's happened between Dean and Stu and the board or whatever, he's decided to move on to Barnet. He's gone to go and do better things. I think he's improved them. They were one of the most improved teams last season. They've got one of the best teams, if not the best team this season. But I think he's now got to prove himself to go that one step further and win the FA Trophy, win the double, win the National League. Because, and I've said before, and this is nothing to do with the fact he used to manage Wealdstone. He's got now prove himself at that top level. Yep. They can't bottle it like they did last year and in the FA Trophy. They've got to a point where they've got to kick on and they haven't done it. And I think this season is where they've got to do it.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I definitely think this is the season where he needs to prove himself, and Barnet definitely need to go up. So one thing that I wanted to talk about Wealdstone is I think historically, I think it's fair to say that Wealdstone have had a pretty successful past in terms of youth academy. You've produced players like Stuart Pearce and Jermaine Beckford and players like that. So is that still something that's really important to Wealdstone? And do you think the youth academy is still as successful today?
I mean, they haven't got an academy to the level that boys can be produced straight into the National League, but they've started to build an academy which is going to help with a pathway through to the first team eventually. You know, there's a tie-in with Brunel University now as our main sponsor. They've got great facilities to train at as a first team through the university. You know, we've had 𝗘𝟭𝟭 gone on to Wycombe Wanderers from the academy recently, and his brother, who was in the academy, played for Gibraltar with him last week or the week before. So there is little gems there. We've got a couple out on loan in lower divisions and non-league, sort of getting men's football experience. But I think they're a little bit way off being able to sort of produce players straight for that first team. But I think having the academy helps with that community tie, helps with a pathway to the first team, but also just helps. You know, it funds. It helps generate money for the club.
Yeah, well, I definitely think at this level, I think it's really important to have a solid youth team. I think Southend definitely have a solid youth team at the moment, so that's good and something definitely positive on and off the field. So one thing that I did actually want to talk about, so I'm sure, I don't know how many people know this yet, but something staying on the history sort of theme with Wealdstone, you actually do have quite a rich history in the sense of in the 1984-85 season. So I think you might know where I'm going with this, but you became the first ever team to win the conference and the FA Trophy. Is that right? So how important is that still to the club's identity, and is that something that the fans, it really resonates with them?
I think it's something that they're very proud of. To be the first team to win the non-league double, it is something that should be sort of spoken about and not forgotten. You've got to understand that it was sort of nearly 40 years ago now, so you can't dwell on that. But the fact that the first team to win the non-league double, you had the likes of Vinnie Jones in there. I know he didn't play that day, but names that have gone on to play in the Football League. And I think what's more important to the football club is the fact that they stayed alive. They had their halcyon days in the 80s, into the 90s where they lost the game. Lost their ground. They sold their ground, and through one thing and another, they didn't get where they were meant to go, which is now Barnet's ground. They became homeless, essentially. They played in Edgware, they played in Yeading, they played at Northwood. And to sort of almost think now that they're getting 2,500 people at their home ground, live on national television in the National League, I think that's what they're prouder of at this moment in time. And to be able to compete with the likes of Southend, because we could only go to the Southends and Notts Counties and Chesterfields in hope that, when it may be an FA Cup tie or an FA Trophy tie. We're now going toe to toe with them. We're now taking points off them. We're now competing with them. I think that's the biggest testament to the football club. And we all say that we have the best fans, and we all say we've got the best football club. And I appreciate that. But it's a unique football club down there, and it's got something about it. It is a little bit bonkers. The fans are very, very passionate. And if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be playing Southend on Tuesday night, as an example. They fought tooth and nail to get that club surviving, and to go from Ryman's Division 3 within sort of 20 to 30 years to be in the National League. When you think someone like Oldham have gone the other way, we're now on the same playing field. I think that's what we've got to be proud of.
Well, yeah, I definitely think there's a lot to be proud of for Wealdstone. Hopefully you stay up this season, so that'll be a nice fitting way to celebrate. So with the season as a whole, obviously we spoke about it a little bit. Poor start to the season really for Wealdstone. One win in 10, and not great results in that. But what do you think, going forward? What do you think are of Wealdstone's chances this season?
Realistically, we've just got to finish fifth from bottom. I think in the short term, we've got to start picking some points up, whether that's on Tuesday night against Southend, which I think is going to be a difficult one to do. But we've just got to start getting a little bit of confidence and picking some points up in the short term. Longer term, does the manager get changed or not? That's not for me to say at the moment in time. I think we just got to just keep calm. We just need to stay in this league. We've got plans for a new stadium coming shortly into the London Borough of Hillingdon. There's support from them and local developers. But I think a lot of that hinges on investment, and obviously investment comes from being in the top league. So the pressure's on from the club to sort of stay in the league. They've probably invested more money this season than they've ever before in the playing squad and management, because the management are full-time, the physio's full-time. You know, you've got a time with a local physiotherapy clinic to try and generate a bit of business. So there's real things off the field that they're doing. We've got to match that on the field, but it's going to be really, really, really tough. And we just need to finish above that dreaded fourth from bottom space.
Well, obviously, this is a Southend podcast, so I would like to talk a little bit about Southend. So we've spoken about Wealdstone quite a lot. So obviously, I know that you know quite a lot about National League because of we'll speak about it later, but your podcast with Luke. So what do you think of Southend's chances this season?
I mean, the fact they've not started brilliantly is not going to help them. And it was a bit similar to last year, wasn't it? I honestly thought with the fact that the off-the-field problems had sorted themselves out, that actually they're going to sort of kick on. Hasn't really happened. But, you know, a result like yesterday is going to be something that's going to hopefully sort of be that ignition. And having like Macaulay Bond come in, let him settle in. You've then got a centre forward of pedigree. I genuinely think they should be in the playoffs at least, you know, if not challenging for promotion. I think they've got to stay calm with Kevin Mayer. I think the fans have got to give him a little bit of, you know, respite and sort of let him get on with it. There's high expectations of that football club. There always will be, especially now that your horrible owner's gone and you've got some new sensible ones in. Yeah. So, you know, it's a really difficult one. So, as I said, the league's getting stronger, but I think Southend have got to be in there for a shout of the playoffs at least.
No, I agree, and I think a lot of fans will agree with that as well. And, you know, we're sort of almost a victim of our own success from last season. So last season, you know, the expectations were sort of quite similar to yourself, like just stay up because of the situation we're in, and we sort of knew that a point deduction was probably possible at some point in the season. Obviously, it did happen in the end. So really, throughout the season, it was just try and stay up. Mid-table would be a miracle. And then, you know, we finished just outside the playoffs. If we didn't have that point deduction, you know, we would have been right in the playoffs. So it's, you know, and then this season, the expectations like top three, and, you know, it's not happening at the moment. But a brilliant win against Solihull yesterday. I mean, that was just such a great game, and it was just a proper game of just showing heart and passion. And yeah, I think so. Hopefully, I mean, you're not going to like this, but hopefully, if we beat Wealdstone, then it'll be a good way to sort of build a bit of momentum and just keep pushing, really, because that's what we need. We need a consistent run of games, which we haven't really had yet. So with Southend, are there any players that stick out to you in particular? I mean, I know one name you're probably going to say, considering he's the second highest goal scorer in the league at the moment. But what players stick out to you in particular with Southend?
Listen, I have to admit, I like Gus Scott Morris. I happen to know 𝗘𝗭𝟏, who took him to Hemel Hempstead from sort of the lower leagues. And Lee said to me 2 or 3 years ago, this kid will kick on. You know, he'll end up in the Football League. You know, England C international last year, and he's proving probably, I haven't seen Southend, but I'm guessing he's one of their best players this season, if not the best. Yeah, I like Scott Morris. Southend, I think they're probably better as a collective than individually. You know, the way they sort of dug in last year, right, and in the real adverse sort of situation to dig out enough points to be in the playoffs. If you had the 10 points added back on, I think it's testament to the team. And you know, I might be doing Southend an injustice here, some of the players, but none of them would stick out to me as being like a really top non-National League players. They're very, very good players, clearly, and you know, as a team, they've just done a really good job. It'd be interesting to see him on Tuesday now that, you know, the problems off the field have settled down and you've had a couple of half decent results and you're sort of going the right way. And yeah, I hope for Southend that they do well. I hope for fans like yourselves that they do well, because you know, no one wants to see their club go. You know, I'd imagine you'd watch them in the Essex Premier League or you'd watch them in the National League, but you know, you want the club to survive. So it's nice to have clubs like that in the league. It's nice to have grounds to go to, albeit it's probably a little bit worn around the edges now, Roots Hall, but it's a great place to go, especially that away end. Listen, I think Southend as a collective approach nationally team, and if you've got the likes of Gus Scott-Morris who are doing a little bit, then you're heading in the right direction.
No, I think it's really interesting you say that, and yeah, I do agree. Actually, I think as a team we're just a really, really solid team, and obviously we have spots of quality, but I think it would be hard to look at that team and say, all right, he's the weakest player, or he's the strongest. Really, you could say there's probably about 5 or 6 that you could say are our best players, and there's probably the whole team. It'd be really tricky to say who would be the worst. So yeah, I think we're definitely a strong like squad as a team, and the work that Kevin Mayer has done is brilliant. All the people say asking for Mayer out. I mean, crazy, but I didn't hear them anybody saying that after yesterday. So hopefully, if we pick up a bit of run of form, I mean, those weird comments will stop. So hopefully. So lastly, I would like to talk about the game itself. So what players of Wealdstone should we be looking out for on Tuesday?
We've got a lad up front called Callum McFarland. Very, very. He's like a Duracell bunny. He doesn't stop. He's ball retention is good for a young lad. He's coming from the Fulham Academy, but his energy is unbelievable. Michael Obriero's been a little bit of a bright spark this season. Didn't have a really good season last year, but he's definitely a threat. It's a difficult one. Because we've got another couple of players sort of to come back, but Alex Dyer is a calming influence in midfield. The problem is, being brutally honest, there's no one that feels threatening at the moment, if that makes sense. There's no one there that we can go, right, give the ball to him. He's no 𝗘𝟭𝟭𝗟 or Aaron Henry from the last few seasons. And, I'm struggling here to think, right, who could be the bright spark that could cause Southend a challenge? Those two up top, yes. I say defensively, we're pretty good. We're pretty good. So, yeah, at the moment, there's no one that's really gripping me and going, come on, let's give the ball to them, or they're going to do a bit. And because of that, that's why we're struggling with hardly any goals.
But yeah, definitely, as we've spoken about it quite a lot now, goals definitely seems to be an issue. So, hopefully, obviously, I think something that plays into National League clubs' favour is definitely not having a window necessarily. I think that definitely plays into our favour in a way because we can do recruitment throughout the whole season, which definitely helped Southend last season. Because if we were just limited to the summer and January, like league clubs are, that could have been a real issue for us because we wouldn't have been able to really sign anyone. Because in the summer we were struggling, and in the January it weren't looking great at times. So yeah, I think hopefully as the season kicks on, maybe Wealdstone might be able to do a bit more recruitment and maybe get that goal scorer that they need. So one question that I always find is interesting with fans. So I always like to hear a bit about Wealdstone's style of play. We've touched on it a bit about it being exciting, but obviously Southend pride ourselves on really quite attacking and quite exciting football. So how do you think Wealdstone's style of play and Southend's style of play, how do you think that will come together to make an interesting game on Tuesday?
It'll probably be similar to what we saw yesterday with Barnet, because Barnet do try and play on the front foot, play high. Wealdstone under Matty Taylor have gone, as I say, gone 2 up top, and they do try and get the ball wide, but I would suggest they probably go a little bit more direct than we're used to seeing when Maynard was in charge. Maynard used to play from the back, play through the lines, whereas we're going a bit longer, a bit more direct, with a bit of purpose, it has to be said. But at the moment, it's still not looking like there's enough quality in that.
Yep.
We are very good defensively, and hopefully, if we on the whole, we can deal with that sort of front-footed, better teams that we play against who have an attacking threat. I think the challenge we got is, you've got attacking threats from the wings, especially through some, with Scott Morris in the vein of form he's in, is trying to sort of stop that wide threat as well as through the middle. So if you've got those dual threats of both, it's a really challenging thing to do, because obviously then we can't use our fullbacks or our wide midfielders or wingers, whatever you want to call them, to then be offensive. They've got to sit in defensively, and then you then become almost 8, 9, 10 men behind the ball, and then if you try and break, it's difficult because you haven't got those players forward. So I think we've got to take the game to Southend a little bit. You know, we did with Barnet in the first half yesterday, and then Barnet stepped it up, and we really weren't, you know, we were there or thereabouts, but we weren't any threat. And I think that's what we need to do with Southend, is take the game to Southend, see what we can do, and then maybe hang in from there if Southend then get a little bit on top and get possession and use the quality that they obviously have.
Well, it's definitely a good strategy to stick it on Southend, because I think when teams allow us to have more of the ball, I think it definitely that's definitely our game. Our game is definitely possession. It's possession mixed in with a bit of direct attacking and just sort of breaking down teams. But when a team has more of the ball than us and sort of, you know, sticks it on us and puts pressure on us, we've seen it this season. We are prone to a few mistakes, and we are prone to conceding a few goals. So I think if Wealdstone really come at us, it could be a bit of a shock to the system, and you could get if you get a few early goals, then it could definitely swing in your favour. And I think one problem that Southend have had this season is, if you look at a lot of our games, we keep scoring a goal relatively early on, going 1-0 up, and then ending up, you know, drawing 1-0 or losing 2-1. So I think it's definitely an issue. But we saw it with Solihull yesterday when, you know, we went 1-0 up, but then we got that second goal, and that second goal completely changed the game, because from that moment we had more confidence, and even though they got 2 goals, we scored 2 others. So it was, you know, when we got that second goal, it really helped. So yeah, I think our biggest issue is probably taking the lead then losing, but it's probably our biggest issue, which isn't great. But we're nearing the end of the podcast. So I really appreciate your time, Paul. So one thing that I did want to talk about, because I like to sort of make these podcasts a bit more, obviously we're talking about Wealdstone and Southend here, so it's a bit of a niche audience, but I like to expand it a little bit to National League as well. So with the National League, obviously one thing that I wanted to talk about just towards the end is, obviously they've announced the National League trophy that's come out recently. So what are your thoughts on that?
Probably a bit of a nonsense, to be honest, isn't it? I said, as I said on another podcast, if any of these lads are good enough to go and play men's football, they'll get picked up by National League sides and get loan deals. You know, the FA telling around saying it's good for them, the academy, to play against these teams. Realistically, are Southend going to play their first 11 on a Tuesday night against, I don't know, whoever it may, Southampton under 21s? Of course they're not going to. They're going to play squad players, kids, trialists. So you're not going to see the best. There's going to be no one watching them. You know, yes, there's a bit of prize money. Yes, there might be a trophy at the end that you can hang your hat on and say we won the Premier. But it's just a bit of a nonsense, to be honest, mate. And you know, we play these teams in pre-season. We can get friendlies against them. I think it's again another half-baked idea that the National League are trying to get into bed with the Premier League and the EFL, and because of that, we're kind of going to be suffering a little bit. You know, like to Wealdstone haven't got the players to play in this competition. Why they've against it, I don't know. But, you know, it is what it is. We'll see what happens. It may be a success. I think the benefit is we'll get players who we can see maybe could get on loan or might be coming into the National League who get released from these teams. But apart from that, well, I think it's a bit of a nonsense.
No, yeah, I'm not very on board with it either, and I'm glad that Southend aren't participating in it. I think that's good, but it's a weird thing, really, because with the replays and stuff, you know, that was they were meant to be getting rid of those to reduce games, and suddenly we have a whole new trophy where we have to play a lot more games. So it just doesn't make sense to me. It just seems really strange, and yeah, I'm glad that Southend aren't participating in it, because that is playing 2 cups and the league is enough at this, especially at this level where we have no squad depth at all. I mean, you know, we have we just about managed to fill our bench, but even then we've got about 3 youngsters on it, so it's not ideal, our squad depth by any means. And then we've got to play an extra cup. We've got 3 cups and a league. It's just too much, I think. And yes, as you said, it's a really strange thing, to be honest. So obviously I think we're at the end of the podcast now. So one thing that I would like to ask, you probably know what's coming, but lastly, Paul, what is your score prediction for Tuesday?
Oh God. What would I like it to be? I'd like it to be a scrappy 1-0 win from Wealdstone. Good defensively, get a goal. What I'm thinking it's going to probably be is 2 or 3-1 to Southend.
Okay. Oh well, I'd be happy with the latter of that. Maybe not if I, because I will be going to the game. So if I come to the game on Tuesday and we lose 1-0, might not be the best day out for me, but we'll see. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, Paul. I've really enjoyed it. So lastly, obviously we spoke about it before, but do you want to just shout out? Obviously, I'll leave the link below, but do you want to just shout out the podcast that you do with Luke?
Yeah, so I do the Thursday National League predictions with Luke Walsh. I think it was at Luke Walsh Podcast. We talk about the weeks before, and we review and try and suggest what the scores are going to be going forward. But I'm also part of the @StonesCast85 podcast group, and we do a weekly, sort of bi-weekly one for the Wealdstone Wealdstone fans rather. So yes, I appear every now and then on these sort of guest ones for other clubs as well. So if you want to listen to the Wealdstone one, please do. Please subscribe and listen on the Thursday to us, Luke and I, and I know you get involved as well. So yeah, let's sort of build that National League base. But for now, it's been a pleasure to be on. So thanks for having me.
Oh, no worries at all, Paul. I've really enjoyed I really appreciate your time. So yeah, well, it's about the end of the podcast now. So I'll leave the links to that below. If everyone wants to go and check them out, that'd be greatly appreciated. The National League podcast that you spoke about with Luke is brilliant. I'm definitely gonna have Luke on when we play Halifax soon. So that'd be great. And yeah, obviously it's a National League podcast. Probably I'll leave the links to the Wealdstone one below as well. It might be an interesting watch if people want to know a bit more about Wealdstone going into Tuesday's game. But I think probably the National League podcast a bit more suited to my fans. But I'll leave both links below if everyone wants to check them out. Let's hope this game actually goes ahead this time, and I don't end up eating pizza in Wealdstone and find out the game's called off. So let's hope that doesn't happen again.
No, it would be all right.
Let's hope so. So again, thank you for coming on, Paul.
No
if everyone has enjoyed, please make sure to like and subscribe. Check out Paul's links below, and I'll see you all on the next one.